So then Bill turns to Frank, and this is the most beautiful line that anyone can say to anybody. And he's like, I wasn't afraid before I met you. Instant tears. Hey everyone, welcome back to Candid Cinema. I'm Amanda, otherwise known as AMX and D Reviews on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd. Today I will be reviewing episode 3 of The Last of Us, entitled Long, Long Time. We were not prepared for this episode last night. I think that fans of the game were quite surprised with the turn of events in this episode, and this will be a spoiler review, just telling you guys that up top, because a lot of things happen to move the plot along, contrary to what everyone else has been saying, especially fans of the game. Luckily I follow people on my timeline that absolutely love this episode, and they were not complaining about it. So I was really happy about that. The thing with this episode is that A, it's unexpected. B, you're giving character backstories that completely change things from the game, from what I've been reading. And it made for one of the most raw, beautiful, emotional moments on television in quite some time now. And of course, it happens on HBO. They can't lose. HBO's way too good at what they do, and they have phenomenal writers for The Last of Us. So in this third episode, we have Ellie and Joel venturing out after Tess's death, and they have to go to Bill's house. Bill lives on the outskirts in this like different area, far from the QZ zone, and he gets his own backstory. And people were talking about like Bill and Frank and what they were gonna, do and how they were going to like interact with like Ellie and Joel. And I was pumped, and especially because Nick Offerman was playing Bill, so I was really excited for that. So Joel and Ellie, they had their banter back and forth, which I absolutely adore. Joel goes into one of his like old, I guess, warehouses. It wasn't really a warehouse, but it was this old, either I think it was like a restaurant or something, that he stored his his goods, kept it hidden. He has like other weapons in there, a whole bunch of stuff, supply closet basically. So they go in. Joel obviously says, Ellie, don't go anywhere, don't do anything. What does Ellie do? Ellie goes into like a basement, and she starts like searching around. Again, the tension, lighting, all of this perfectly works, and it keeps the suspense from the first two episodes. It's not that suspense heavy in this episode particularly. This one takes a turn. So I'll get into that after. Ellie searches the supplies and she finds tampons. It's small things like that you put in for women where we're sitting there like, yeah, we would still have periods during the apocalypse. Like, it's not like we wouldn't. So to have that just simply planted while like there's an infected person underneath rubble scaring the bejesus out of her, it's just a very small thing to add to the character of Ellie, and just adds so much to the world that they're currently living in, is that we have to scrounge for women's sanitary products because where the hell are they getting them? So that was just like a nice little touch that I appreciated. But Ellie was startled, but she approached the infected. And the one thing about this show is that the freaking makeup department, oh my God, literally brilliant work. Like, just the prosthetics, to put the headpiece on the infected, to have like different sections of the face like protruding out with the, just the pieces of the fungus. Like, it's just something so cool, and I love watching them. I love looking at the designs of these creatures that they have put in the show. So subtle things like that. Ellie approaches the infected, takes out her switchblade like a badass, staring it down, and she cuts open his temple. He cuts it open, and you're intrigued. You're like, why is she doing that? What is the purpose of that? And then she stabs it in the head. So I was like, Ellie, girl, holy, you're like fiery. You know what to do with that switchblade. And it was just a small moment for Ellie where it's like, you have that balance of like, I need feminine hygiene products, but I'm also going to stab this creature in the head. Like, that was pretty awesome in the same scene that happened. And then she obviously doesn't go to Joel right away after he calls her. Joel has no idea what she's doing. And, he gets his stuff with Ellie and they start walking towards Bill. Now, after that, we don't see Joel or Ellie for a good portion of this episode, which can piss people off. But I really loved that we got a flashback here because Ellie had walked to this trail where she saw the remains of these poor victims of basically murders because they were not infected. And there was this blanket, this baby's blanket just rolling in the wind. And then it cut to a flashback of, the baby with the blanket, their mother holding them in 2003 when it first started. Perfect. Love those transitions. It's stuff like that where it's like people remember how to do transitions properly. So we cut to the flashback and they're all leaving this particular suburban area with, the military and all of that. But the one person who remains is Bill, who is played beautifully by Nick Offerman. Again, I have not played the games. I know nothing. But what a performance by Nick Offerman in this freaking episode. Fantastic work. Bill is a survivalist, which he says later on in the episode, but for the purpose of me explaining who he is and why he's staying there, he's a survivalist. So in his basement, he literally has a whole arsenal of weapons and he put security cameras positioned around the area, especially around his house. He has booby traps, barbed wire. He completely fenced everything around, but he stayed in his basement. So he didn't leave that area. He didn't want to leave his home. He thinks that I can fend for myself here. I know what I can do to ward off, these infected. At the time, he didn't really fully know what it was and he didn't know how bad it was going to get, but he's like, I can do this on my own. So Bill's just fixing his area. There's flamethrowers, there's booby traps, so he goes to do that. And then you see that he has his own shed where he keeps the food. And you see that he made a nice steak for himself. He's cooking. He has a beautiful dinner prepared, a bottle of wine. That's what he's been doing, but he's alone. So days pass, years pass, and someone ends up falling into one of his traps. So it's a ditch. And this guy's like, I'm not infected. Don't shoot me. Turns out it's Murray Bartlett who plays Frank in this episode. Murray Bartlett is one of the most underappreciated actors coming onto the scene in 2022. I mean, he started in The White Lotus. I watched The White Lotus late. I didn't expect to love him as much in The White Lotus, but I adore him in Welcome to Chippendales. And if you haven't watched that on Hulu, highly recommend. He makes the show. No offense to Kumail Nanjiani, but Murray Bartlett in Welcome to Chippendales, fantastic. He's so good. And even better as Frank in this episode. So we meet Murray Bartlett. He comes out of the hole as Frank. And he's like, listen, I haven't eaten in 2 days. I feel gross. I haven't showered. I won't tell anybody else that you're here. And just says, okay, fine. Lets him in, takes a shower, preps his meal, serves him. But there's this weird tension between the two of them. And I kind of caught it the second he sat down for dinner. He sat him down for dinner. Beautiful table displayed. The way he kind of poured the wine was different because you feel the tension right off the bat. And Nick Offerman plays it a bit more reserved and closed off, which is fine. But Frank is poking and he's prodding and he's saying the right things. They get to know each other a bit over dinner. And then before Frank's supposed to leave, Frank's like, oh my God, there's a piano. And then he starts playing this beautiful song by Linda Ronstadt called Long, Long Time, which is the title of this episode. And he's terrible. Frank is terrible. So he kind of pushes Bill. He's like, play this song for me. And it's so heartbreaking because Bill has this love. He has something inside him. He's loved before, but he didn't know how to express himself. And that song he kind of held on to. But again, Frank pushes and, it's in a different way. It's subtly revealed that Bill is actually gay. And I love that scene. That's not the only scene that I love in this because it turns into this beautiful queer love story on HBO for The Last of Us that no one really expected with these characters and this backstory in relation to the game. So to create an entire backstory between two people that apparently disliked each other in the games, which we only have like I think 2 cutscenes or 3 cutscenes with them in the actual game. So there was a hatred in the game, and they gave them a queer love story in the show. And I'm like, what a flip turn of events. But the whole purpose of their little love story, because Frank does stay, okay? Frank and Bill share a beautiful life together as the 2 decades pass in between that time. And we see that like Tess and Joel do go visit them because obviously Frank wanted friends. Frank had been radioing Tess and they were talking to each other. And it's just funny that both couples in that case mirrored each other, where Joel and Bill, they didn't really get along. They had their defenses up. Meanwhile, like Tess and Frank are just like, we're chilling. We're actually going to enjoy this dinner outside. You guys can be sucks about it and keep your guard up. That's fine. So it was a cute moment that way. But you're showing the relationship between people when it gets into survival mode. You know, you're showing that there is such a long period of time where you had to fend for yourself. And it's just such a beautiful development for these characters to give this kind of backstory. It just shows the time that you've spent with someone in like these poor circumstances, and that if you do have that one person that you love, it doesn't matter what's happening around you, which I absolutely love. It's beautiful. It really is. And I just felt like that's the only way, and that's the best way to kind of show time passing in this case. I think that's the best way, because you saw like the Raiders coming and attacking them as well. You saw that times were changing in regards to this pandemic, and they were adapting to it. But at the same time, they had each other. So the outside world just wasn't important. It's like they lived in this little bubble. And it gets really emotional because Frank gets sick. Frank gets sick, and they made a joke that obviously like he's younger, Bill's older. We have to, you know, look out for each other, that type of thing. And the one line that really got to me was from Bill, because you see like it has nothing to do with the way he looks, but sometimes it like characteristically it does have to do with the way he looks. He's this big guy with such a big heart, but he's so quiet, and he has like this full ass beard. His hair is gorgeous. That wig is gorgeous. It's like beautiful hair. But he says to Frank over this beautiful patch of strawberries, and he was worried that he was getting older, and he's like, oh no, you know, we have each other. And I'm happy that we're still here to get older. Like, that's a beautiful sentiment as well. So then Bill turns to Frank, and this is the most beautiful line that anyone can say to anybody. And he's like, I wasn't afraid before I met you. Instant tears. That is emotional as hell, because that means that whether he passes or Frank passes, he's afraid to ever live alone again without his life partner. That is the most beautiful line in recent years. It is beautiful, and it was delivered perfectly. So you get to connect with these characters that we know nothing about. This is the first episode that we see Bill and Frank, and you don't even care what's happening with Joel and Ellie right now because they're so invested with them. So you see what the pandemic has caused. You see how people are like forced to live afterwards, but then you also see that their ideology, their perspective on life has changed as well because of the circumstances. That's what you see in this episode, and it's the perfect way to show it, because how else are you going to show it? How else are you going to connect with that? Other than the first episode where he completely loses his daughter, right? This is how you show the time passing and everything that has changed within those years. As I said, Frank is sick. He decides one day, he's like, today's the day I'm going to leave this earth. I'm going to die. And he tells Bill, he explains the process, the path that he wants to take. And he's like, I want to marry you. I want to get married, and we're going to have a beautiful dinner. You're going to poison my wine with pills or powder, whatever they said. And you're going to let me die today. That is what Frank did. Bill's obviously a mess. They do the whole thing. They have a beautiful montage. They're getting married. They exchange rings. Just beautiful moments. The score, fantastic as well. Really got you in the feels. They're having dinner. And Frank has the last drop of wine. And then Bill has the last drop of wine. And Frank looked at Bill. It's like, you had pills in the bottle of wine from the beginning of this evening. So they've both been like heavily drugged to knock themselves out. And Bill clearly does not want to live without Frank. So they both go peacefully. And the way it was shown, bless the editing in this episode. Because again, it was perfect. They didn't show them dead. And once they get to the end of this episode, Ellie and Joel end up going to Bill's house. They don't really find them in there. The food's still on the dinner table with like flies going to it. Ellie finds a note for Joel, kind of explaining what had happened. And Ellie tells Joel that Bill has left his entire arsenal of weapons, left the car. He finally has a car and all of that. So that closes up Bill and Frank while still moving the story forward. And that was their ultimate purpose in the game as well, where from what I've been reading, Bill is only there to give Joel the car battery. Yet we have an entire backstory that is one of the most gorgeous pieces of television that I've ever seen. So the final shot is of, Joel and Ellie, they're in the car. She's like, I've never been in a car before. She starts touching buttons like a, perfect teen would. And it was so cute. And I love their dynamic, Joel and Ellie. But I'm not upset that I didn't get enough of Joel and Ellie in this episode. I'm not upset because you're showing different perspectives of how people are living through this and how they did live through this. So the final shot, it's so sad. It's just, you have the final shot of Joel and Ellie driving away from Bill's house, and then you just have the camera moving back and coming into one of the windows where obviously they're laying there. He didn't go into the room. They're both dead. They're just laying on this bed together. The window's open. The breeze is coming in. The curtains are flowing in the wind. And that is the final shot of this episode. It's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. You're going to remember the romance between Bill and Frank and not how you saw them dead. That's the last thing you're going to remember, is that they died peacefully together in each other's arms on their bed, and they still move the story forward. It's a beautiful ending to this episode. I don't care if you thought that it was out of place. How else did you want this to happen? Let's say that they did go see Bill. You had Frank and him have an argument. Bing, bang, boom. He dies. And then he still gives him the car battery, moves forward. We're never going to see Bill again, according to what happens in the game. So Bill's just going to be chilling there for what? Because then you have to bring Nick Offerman back again for what? If we never see Bill again, if they're moving forward, Joel and Ellie. That would have been an extra, I'd say 10 minutes tacked on to episode 2. And then we would have just moved on with the story. Instead of giving Bill, which would be played by Nick Offerman, absolutely nothing to go off of and nothing to work with, and he could have been like this crabby old man in his basement, you gave a heartfelt story to show the years passing in such a beautiful, profound way. And I would take this episode over a 10-minute, not even 5-minute scene of him giving him the car battery. Like 100%. This was a beautiful episode. Honestly, 10 out of 10. I think that this episode is going to be nominated for writing, and the first episode of this season is going to be nominated for direction because it was just so well written. These backstories are fantastic. So I really love The Last of Us. I really love where this is going. I love that they're changing things from the game. They're writing these characters with more depth, which you have to do in a TV format, and I really love this episode. I can't wait to watch it on Sundays. Like it hasn't happened to me in a very long time where I'm excited for the next episode. This is the first time in a while where like I'm not pushing myself to watch the next episode. It's like, is it Last of Us Sunday yet? And HBO is the only one that's doing it. I'm not gonna lie. So guys, please let me know how you feel about episode 3 of The Last of Us in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. You can always follow me over at AMX NDA Reviews on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd. I'll catch you guys next time. Keep watching movies.